present day parallel story, I have been doing hip hop abs with Shaun T. And if that Pussycat Dolls comes on in a grocery store somewhere, shit is going to get real.
You're listening to the Raw Honeys podcast, the place for women who crave connection. Join Chelsea Fine, Heather Hildenbrand, and me, Amanda Axel. We're real friends who aren't afraid to talk about the raw truth of real life. If you're looking for a group of girlfriends who will support and encourage you when the going gets tough, this is the place to be. Pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and enjoy the show. Well, speaking of being between things.
Oh, man. I feel like you're doing it on purpose now.
I really wasn't expecting a laugh out of that one.
Oh man.
No.
Well, it doesn't take much for us. Okay.
Yeah. But seriously, between Marie Kondo and the new I don't owe you anything mindset of our current culture, we're so quick to fire our friends when they disappoint or don't live up to our expectations. Can I get a
amen?
Yeah, can we get
It's true.
What's something for amen that we could say that's like just
preach?
Honey.
Yeah.
Word to your mother.
Holla at your girl.
Holla at your honeys.
I like that.
I like that.
All right. Can I get a holla at your honeys?
Holla.
Holla. We're going to work on that.
Yeah, next time.
Yeah. No, but seriously, like this is something that we always kind of graze in all of our episodes, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what do we do when friendship goes awry?
Ooh, right.
And we've been through the whole gamut of trying to put things back together. We did all the work, all the stuff that we've talked about in every other episode. And we just kind of come to the conclusion that we have no choice but to let our friends go. So how does that work? How do we declutter our friends?
Oh my gosh.
So have you guys ever had to break up with a friend?
Like where they knew about it?
No, right? Like that's such a great distinction because it's like when you separate from a friend, it's different than being in a romantic relationship because there's so much fidelity involved in a romantic relationship, right? Friendship is not the same thing. So you really could technically break up with someone and they have no idea, or you could make it official. But like, does that seem like too dramatic, to make it official too,
Yeah.
I don't know. So back to what you were saying, Heather, it kind of sounds like you have broken up with someone who didn't know it.
Tell us more.
Well, I mean, they probably figured it out eventually, right? I mean, what I'm saying is I should qualify all of this by saying that like all of the different ways I've decided to either end or distance myself from a friendship, all of the ways that I've done that with certain people or different people is all based on my individual relationship with them. So I was making it funny, but I think that there have certainly been times where I have had to spell it out and kind of like a romantic relationship, make it official and say, this isn't working, or, it's not you, it's me. Just kidding, it's you, or whatever the situation called for. But then there are times where, maybe you're not super close with them, or, you maybe have come to a place where you realize the only time you ever see that person is because you've been the one to reach out, and you go, okay, you know what? I'm not going to reach out and let's see what happens. And then nothing happens. Just like you thought, you haven't seen them in 2 years now because you haven't reached out and they certainly weren't reaching out. And that's just kind of where it landed, and that's okay. Some people maybe move away and you don't talk anymore, and that just kind of fizzles, and that's a natural thing. So there's lots of different ways I think that we friendships move in and out. But I think what we're obviously talking about today is when we've made a conscious decision. But even making a conscious decision doesn't mean you have to tell them. It still could fall into one of these categories that I'm just talking about. You could still just like choose to let it fall away, and then it just does that naturally. I think a lot of times, if you realize that you're not a good friendship match with somebody, it's because you are not in a same place either in life or like in your beliefs or in your personality or some way that it makes it gives it like friction or what is it when like magnets
like it's
don't attract,
repel,
yeah, like the polarizing of sometimes you just have people in your life that it sort of happens like that, where you just kind of let it take its course, and that's just going to happen. And isn't that nice when you don't have to
when you don't have to do anything?
Right? Isn't that nice? It just sort of happens. Oh, so yes. Well, so it's been all of the above for me. What about you, Chelsea?
I totally agree with you as far as like how the nature of friendship tends to work. There's only a few different ways that a friendship pans out, and sometimes it fizzles out, and sometimes it's a conscious decision. But yeah, what we're talking about here today is what you're saying. Like it's a conscious decision that we're making, or it's something where we make ourselves aware of at the very least to want to make a change in action with them. But for me personally, I know I'm sitting here trying to think of it. I can only really think of one friendship I've had where I did make a really deliberate and out loud decision to not remain close to that person. So I guess there was like a formal breakup text or something. But the only one relationship that I can really think of right now, because for the most part, any friendships I've had in the past that haven't panned out in a pleasant way, and there aren't many, but for the most part, they kind of went more along the lines of like that fizzle, that kind of silence. And I just allowed them to remain that because I felt like it was better for me or healthier for me or whatever. But as far as like that more formal out loud kind of breaking up with a friend or having discussions with a friend before you're like, you know what, this isn't working out, I'm done with you or whatever. I don't know if I've ever really experienced that one-on-one outside of that one friend with a text message and it really had nothing to do with our interpersonal relationship. It had to do with like our living circumstances. So maybe I need to learn. Maybe that's what I'm saying. I don't know. What about you, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had that either. It's funny because I was telling you guys, like, I think all of my friendships that have changed over the years, like, I really can't think of too many people that I was really good friends with that I'm not friends with anymore. Like, I can't really think of any that like I still like can't call, But there was this one friend in high school that I think we had an official breaking up, where it was just more like, it was just so tense and like we just could not see eye to eye. And then we had like a straight up breakup, but it actually only lasted about a year.
That's a long time.
And then I know. And then we got back together and we've been good ever since.
So you're not so much an on again, off again friendship. It was just the one blip, or
it was just the one blip that I can remember. But like, that's the only one I can think of where I think it was more deliberate on our parts as to choose to no longer talk. And, I mean, we were in high school, so, it's not like if we had to interact, we would be rude to each other, but we really didn't. We didn't really like say hi to each other in the hallway. Like, it's so funny, like talking about this because I'm talking about high school.
Well, but it counts.
But and it translates over the ages too. I mean, but that's the funny thing. It's like when you're in high school with your friends, like you have to see them, or when you're working with them and you have to see them, sort of thing. Or if you have the same group of friends, like that is so complicated.
Actually, there are probably one or two friends in my life that I haven't, I guess, technically broken up with because they are people that, I either worked with at the time or had to see every day. And so breaking up with them seemed high risk. It could really impact my day-to-day life experience. So that's a good point though. Yeah. When you see someone every day, especially in high school. And I do think we learn a lot of our friendship habits when we're in school, like elementary, junior high, and high school. Like I think we're forming our habits there.
Yeah.
So it matters, what we experience in high school.
Well, we're forming our habits there, and then those habits aren't always either healthy or actually informative because, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons we started this podcast in the first place is because we realized that we were not given all of the tools to navigate interpersonal relationships as kids or teens or even adults. I mean, adults are like the worst because now we're too old to admit that we don't know, and we still don't know.
It's so true.
And so we just keep making messes of it, and there's nobody talking about the delicacy of these relationships. People talk about it in terms of dating, but nobody's talking about it in terms of any other relationship. And so much of it parallels for sure, but there are nuances and just differences. I think a lot of times a conflict with a friend, like a girlfriend, can be just as like stressful or devastating as a conflict with your significant other, and nobody talks about that. So then you don't feel like you're empowered to talk about that or to feel it like that. Or just conflict resolution, or how to deal with somebody who you've decided needs to not be such a big part of your life, but you work with them every day or you go to school with them every day and you have to see them all the time. And how does that work? What do you do? These are all things I think are going to be really good to talk about because nobody else is.
Yeah. That just made me think of like the things that we are being taught in high school and how we're never taught anything about relationships, even though relationships are 90% of our existence.
Right?
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Mm-hmm. We're never taught to even get to know ourselves. And we're with ourselves 100% of the time. So it is really interesting. And so we're supposed to learn from our experience, basically our experiences, because even your family isn't like necessarily intentionally teaching you these sort of things. Sometimes they are.
No. I mean, I think if anything, family is doing the opposite because in my experience, the messaging from family has been when you're connected with somebody in your life, i.e. your family, but I think this translates for a lot of people to just anyone that they're connected to on a daily basis, right? That's like just a foundational part of their life, like a coworker or a schoolmate or something. But our family is like, oh, if you're family, then you have to be in each other's lives because you're family, period. And there's no, guidelines or exceptions or allowances for anything. I mean, I get to hurt you over and over again and you get to let me because we're family. I get to treat you however, or you treat me however. And then if we say sorry, we say sorry. And if we don't, we don't, but we still keep coming back for more because we're family. These are all things that are subliminally taught in families that are not necessarily healthy ways to run a relationship. But this is what we see. This is the example. And so this is all we know. And then we apply that to friendship too. And then we wonder why we pick toxic people as friends. We wonder why we are a toxic person if we're that self-aware to realize that we're contributing 50% of that. Of course, when this is what we see and there's no real conversations, there's just live by example. And these are the examples that we have. It's no wonder that we struggle. And like we've talked about on past episodes, most women, I think, feel like friendship is the last priority on their list after everything else. And it's because this is what friendship is now. And who would want to pursue and build things when they look like that so much of the time,
Well, friendship definitely, at least in our culture, kind of lends a connotation of something that is semi-permanent, which I think makes us feel both safe and unsafe at the same time when we're trying to make new friends or we're trying to work on a friendship or just trying to decide, is this friendship good for me? Is it worth, what it costs or whatever? And so it is an interesting, I guess, perspective that we're sort of conditioned with, socially speaking and stuff. But yeah, absolutely. What we're taught in family might not always be healthy, or even if we're taught something healthy, our execution of that principle might not be healthy because everything in life takes practice. And sometimes it's hard to really get good practice at being friends with someone, especially in a semi-permanent kind of culture like we have right now, where it's very, very easy to fire people for being your friends or to just decide to ghost somebody or whatever, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And like just to Heather's point is we don't apply the same principle to friendship that we do to family, meaning that we have an incentive to stick it out with our family because they're our family and that's what we've been told and they're our blood and they're supposed to stick by us, blah, blah, blah. We don't apply those same things to our friends. And so it has become this sort of all or nothing culture. Heather, can you speak to that a little bit? Because this is something we were chatting about earlier.
Yeah, I actually wonder if this whole, if things don't work, first response is to just sort of fire them, quote unquote, or this whole like I don't owe you anything, including my presence if I just don't feel like it, kind of mentality that is in our current culture. I wonder if that is the response to maybe like a generation or two ago, the way that it felt when it came to interpersonal relationships was more permanent because of family style relationships where, you meet somebody and, hi, I'm Heather. What's your name? Oh, hi, I'm so-and-so. Cool. Now we're friends. And that's forever, like the way that you meet people on the playground, you're friends now. And that's that. And I have to just like deal with it. And whether that came from like, dysfunctional families or dysfunctional friendships, I think maybe there was like a mentality of a more permanence in relationships to that extreme. And so now the response is don't be permanent with anyone to that extreme.
So like we're overcorrecting a little bit, generationally speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that, maybe that's our current culture's knee-jerk response to maybe what it was before is this, and it makes sense, that's why so many people think like this. That's why when you see those memes on Instagram, like, all about like, you don't need these toxic people in your life, get rid of them, or what, those kinds of messaging, it resonates. And why does it resonate? I think it's because we are sort of course correcting on relationships from maybe where we've come from.
Yeah, I would agree that we are most definitely trying to redraw boundaries or trying to find something that makes a little bit more sense, is more practical in a in a social way and a personal way. Yeah, I mean we definitely have had a lot of transitions historically as far as like what friendship looked like and it being permanent or not. But yeah, I would agree that we are probably constantly as a species, we're probably constantly trying to redraw and move the boundaries of what interpersonal connection should look like or will look like. What do you think, Amanda?
Well, I was just really thinking about our theater analogy.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Because it's really like, it's like it's a little bit of a plan, to deal with this overcorrection, because we're not saying that you have to be out of the theater or you have to be in the front row. There are plenty of other seats in the theater and plenty of other rows where you can be seated and still be in the theater. Okay, so basically, if you guys haven't heard about our theater analogy yet,
it's awesome.
We've talked about it several times, especially this season. And so essentially, this is really just kind of a random analogy that I came up with one day when Heather and I were talking. And she was dealing with a friend that she was struggling with. And so we were trying to figure out, we were basically troubleshooting. That's how I deal with things, right? Like there's a problem, I try to fix it, which not everybody loves. Okay.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful trait of yours. I love it.
But that's my personality. So I came up with this theater analogy, and basically it's that there are some people in your life who can be on stage. They could be that close. They could be on stage. They could be in the front row. They could be in the second row. People in your life who are in the third, fourth, or fifth row, those are people that, you love, you see them, but you're not necessarily close. And then there's people in the back row, people that you love at an arm's length, and then there's nothing wrong with that. And so we came up with this analogy. And so, I wanted to ask you guys, like, what does it look like to move people around, to usher them around?
Yeah. Well, I remember you were talking about this with me because I was considering whether or not to friendship break up with someone and how that would work and what that would look like based on like, where they were in my life and kind of like our specific connection and all like dynamic and all that. And I loved it I loved it for a couple reasons because I, up until then, tend to be a very all or nothing kind of person. And I, this whole time thought like, well, that's just me. But I realize now more and more that that's because that's me coming from a culture that promotes that, right? Like it's either you're all the way in or you're all the way out, like we were just talking about. And so I didn't really know another way. I didn't know what that would look like to navigate a third option. And so when Amanda said that to me, it was great because it was just like such a clear visual. And not only that, not only was it like a awesome lesson for me that I still use about kind of moving people. They don't even need to know they were moved. Like I didn't even need to tell this chick, like, don't worry, you're in the back row now, bitch. Like I did not say that to her. That's the beauty of it. It was all for me. And then in the moment when I'm dealing with difficult people or difficult moments with friends, I, in my mind, can move them a row, and that helps me with my boundaries. And that alone, so many times, is enough for me to, continue navigating a relationship with that person because of my, mental awareness of like their status change or whatever. So it was really helpful for all of that. And it's helped me kind of navigate hard things with friends ever since then, really. I mean, it was just really great to know the third option and what that third option would look like. Because now, even if I do have a conversation with a friend about something, I'm not automatically like, I'm never going to say anything because obviously things have to be great, or I have to just break up with them forever. There's no in between. That's not what it looks like anymore. Now I can say something and I can go, okay, but where does this leave us? And sometimes it doesn't leave us in that different place for long. Sometimes you put somebody based on a conversation, put somebody in a back row and they don't stay there. It's just like, this is where we're at right now. And that analogy has helped me so much to learn that and to learn what that looks like on their end, but also on my end, and like how to act with them now. Cause it's just like a relationship. It's like, is it awkward now? What do we say? What do we do? So it helps with all of those things. So I'm so grateful for it. I think it's a fantastic analogy.
So basically the third option is just space.
Yeah.
Right. And, like, it's so funny because the relationship I was talking about earlier, in my high school days, I haven't thought about that for a while, but that's really all that was. We took this year to just have some space from each other. And so, and it was cute, you guys, because when we got back together, it was at prom.
Oh, so adorable.
We had not talked for the entire year. And then prom, we make amends. We get like a photo taken together. It's like, and then everything's good. But you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just need that space because when you're so caught up in all your negative feelings, you don't quite know how you feel about it, what your role in it is, and how it's going to move forward. Like, how can you guys hang out essentially, right? Because that's what we do with our friends. We hang out with them, we talk to them, we lean on them. How can we do these things when I'm feeling this way? So if you just kind of take that space, let it kind of air out, maybe you don't really need to officially break up.
Right. Well, I think, and I would say that like for official breakups, I would like to imagine that those should be pretty rare for people. I think like official breakups with someone that you have at some point in your life really deliberately chosen to be your friend. If you reach a point where you do need to officially permanently break up with them, hopefully that is a rare occurrence in life, because you want to believe, or I want to believe at least that that as you go along in life and learn more about yourself and how you are in interpersonal relationships, you might be able to discern and make better decisions about the people you bring into the theater in the first place. Just the more and more you learn about yourself first. I do think that's probably what you're saying, Amanda. The most important key is learning who you are in friendship and what it is that you need, what it is that you can't really help shoulder. Those are really good, important questions to identify And as far as like moving people around the theater, I mean, I think everybody should have their own process for that for sure. But what I love is exactly what both of you are saying, is just that no matter what, everybody's still in the theater to a certain extent, as long as you want them to be. If there's any part of you that's afraid to not have them in the theater with you going forward, it's cool because you have the option to keep them in there regardless of, which row you're going to put them in for the time being. And I know for me, I often like to think of like when I'm in person with a friend, no matter what row they sit in my friendship theater in life, I like to try to move them to the front row for just that time period that I'm in person with them and that I'm interacting with them, to work on the friendship. If they've been sitting in a far away row, if I get an opportunity to be just one-on-one with them, I try to move them as as close to the front row as possible to give our friendship and myself, the best shot imaginable at making it stronger, and moving them closer and closer, right?
Yeah, I think I would probably even say I've done something like that, but I would probably say I've done the opposite, where instead of bringing them to the front, I go to the back.
Oh, I like that.
Because when I think of the theater, I think of the theater as my boundaries. Every row is a boundary, and which ones are you allowed to be inside of? And if you have like violated what I consider boundaries, sacred boundaries for myself, like my trust, if you've ever broken my trust, or I felt betrayed by you, or, you hurt me and didn't apologize, all these are big things. These are the things that get you sent to the back, right? These are the things that make me want to kick you out. But then I remember Amanda's voice in my head and I'm like, well, let's just start with putting you back here where there's no good lights and there's like popcorn on the floor and you can't hear anything and you can't see anything that's going on up front. And like, that makes me feel a little better. Let's start with that. That's where I start when a large boundary has been crossed. That's where I start. And if I'm going to test the waters to see if I'm going to welcome you back into wherever you might have been before, like a closeness with me, then I have to go to you, meaning I'm not going to let you back across boundaries again. I'm not going to confide in you if you have betrayed my trust. I'm not, going to show up when you've left me hanging over and over again. I'm not necessarily going to put myself in a position where you can do these things to me again. So I'm just going to meet you where you are. It's a little bit like we all have friends that they're a different kind of friend to us, right? We all have a friend that's that one friend that we can confide in and we go to for girl talk and we tell our secrets to and they hold them for us and, they're always going to be there for us and all of that. But then we have other friends who they are our fun friends. So we don't really talk about our secrets and we don't really kind of get deep or serious. We just like go out and have fun together and we laugh a lot. And I get something totally different from them. And it's kind of like that. If you're kind of teetering on like where, if you're in my life or not, or where your place is or whatever, I'm going to put you in that category of friend where like I go to you, but not for anything. I am not going to expect anything from you because I have a feeling you're not going to give it based on our track record, so I'm going to go with a new sense of expectation and sort of like test that out. And the times in my life that I've ever actually officially broken up with a friend has been when I've put them in the back and then I've gone to them and I've tested that out over and over again. And every time it keeps happening. There's no improvement. There's no change. There's no new respect for or consideration about like where I've said I needed things to really be for us or whatever. And so it is rare. And it is like, I've tried to make it better or whatever. Although there have been these are people that have been in my life for a while. They were really a friend and then I had to really make a permanent change about where it wasn't safe for me to have them in my life anymore. Really, I think if I've ever broken up with a friend, it's because I would use the word unsafe in some way, even if it's just emotionally. But I just want to point out that what we're not talking about here is somebody you've met once or twice, and then you found them to be like horribly offensive or rude or just like not in line with your beliefs at all or whatever. And then they want to hang out with you again, for like a second or third or fourth time or whatever. That's not somebody you have to be like, okay, we need to have a talk. this isn't working. You know, I just want to point that out. Like, we're talking about a heavy thing because it would be dramatic to do because of the amount of time and the place they've held in your life. I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to qualify that because there's just a lot of nuances to what we're talking about. So
for you guys, does it feel so does it feel better to put someone in a back row versus kicking them out of the theater initially when the crisis is happening or when it's been happening and it's still fresh?
Yes.
No. I knew that was going to be our answers.
So
Yes.
Chelsea
Yes.
is saying yes, it feels better to put them in the back row. Heather is saying
my
no.
gosh.
Yeah. How
We're opposites.
Listen, your analogy helped me. It doesn't mean it cured me. I still have a tendency to want to fire people. That's why I understand our culture, and that's why we're doing this episode. I want to fire people too. It sounds easy, right? It's like, bye. You know, and then you think your stress is going to go with it, right? But that's not true. So then don't do it.
Well, and I think that is actually a big part of why I feel better not kicking people out of the theater, because my stress about our relationship and my contentment there cannot be soothed if I kick them out. And it's all about me feeling good. Okay.
Is that because you want that person to soothe you? Is that what you're saying?
No. Well, I would say when I was younger, definitely. That was definitely what I thought I wanted when I was younger. But no, I would say now, at least in my life, it's more about self-reflection, or at least learning enough about both of us, but especially about myself in the relationship to know what worked and what did not work, so that it's something that I can address or apply or not apply to my other relationships. So at this point in my life, I really am all about like the edification of connection when it comes to the people who are already in my theater, understand, right? Like these are people, if they're in my theater, I love them. Like if you're in my theater, I love you. I only have like 2 settings on my heart. And if you are a good friend of mine, you're my theater, I actually am in love with you, or have been in love with you at a certain point, and, you know, in an innocent way. Right. So but yeah, when I was younger, I definitely was all like, no, I don't want to feel hurt or icky about this. I want them to make me feel better, which is probably the wrong motivation to keep someone in the theater. But being open to learning about who you are, or how they see you, or who you have the potential to be, with or without them. I think that those are like really, I don't know, they're really special things that you don't always have the opportunity to garner insight like that from other people in your life, you know?
But you know, that's the interesting thing is like the people who piss you off enough, like Heather was saying, we're not talking about a casual 1-2 time you hung out. We're talking about a friendship, something that's developed over time, that's developed a closeness where you love them. You have love for your friend, right? And so when the time comes that they hurt you so badly, that love becomes hate. And hate is not the opposite of love, right? We all know this. Indifference is the opposite. And so what happens to all the love? You know, it really doesn't just disappear. It just gets, in my experience, it just gets very, very muddy. And I think the other thing too, that like for me, the reason I'm not quick to kick people out of theaters is, one, people don't usually piss me off enough to warrant that kind of shit. And 2, the people in my life who have been kicked out of the theater have come back into I have let them back into the theater over time, because that love actually doesn't disappear. What was good between you guys actually doesn't disappear. Now, that may just be for me or for some people, and for other people, it may actually disappear. But you know, there's a great example of this. I don't know. Do you guys watch Glow, the TV show?
No.
I love Glow. Oh, it is amazing. It is like intense, and I don't even know.
I wish I wrote this show. Like, I love this show. I know, seriously, like 2 women wrote it and created it, and I'm just like, I wish one of them was me. But it's so good. But there's a perfect example of what we're talking about in this show. And I don't want to give away any spoilers, but basically there are 2 people on this show who are very good friends, and one fucks up royally, like
real bad,
like the worst thing you could do.
The worst.
She did it, and she got kicked out the theater.
Yeah, way
but
out.
What happened was these ladies got stuck in a literal theater together.
What?
They did. They did.
There is a scene where the woman who screwed up is sleeping out by the pool, right? Like on a lawn chair. She literally got kicked out.
Yeah.
And she's sleeping on a lawn chair. And then the friend that she wronged kind of moseys out there, doesn't realize that the woman is there, her ex-friend is there sleeping. And she goes to lay down. And when she sees her, her instinct is to like get up and go away. But she pauses. And in the moment that she pauses, you can tell she's not going to move. And it's because even though she hates her right now and she is so angry with her, and that woman had such disregard for her life and her feelings, there's still love there. And there's actually comfort in the fact that she is sleeping right there. You know what I mean? Because the love just doesn't disappear.
That is beautiful.
Well, and there are so many beautiful parts to that concept right there, what you're talking about with love. And it's that it just makes it so silly for us to think that we can absorb the love that we have for others. Like we do tend to tell ourselves like, okay, if we're going to kick someone out of the theater, it will be fine because that love tendril that I have connected to them, I'll just pull it right back into my chest and I'll just put it back where it goes and I'll reabsorb it. And that's not really the nature of love. When we offer love, when we give love to someone, it's theirs. We don't get to retract it completely. We never get 100% of it back. And so it is important to maybe never lock the theater doors completely, maybe, because you never know how deep that love cord might actually go or how much it pulls at you.
And that's why I actually don't even worry about it. If you're out of my theater now, you can probably get a ticket eventually.
Okay, well, I'm going to be the oddball and say that there are people that I can't let in my theater for safety.
Oh, well, for sure. Obviously, we don't want danger or of any kind,
right,
to be in the theater.
Right. We just want to say that.
Yeah.
That's all.
No danger.
That is true, because actually there is somebody who's out of my theater that I don't think they're coming back ever. Yeah. They're blacklisted.
They're blacklisted. They will never see another show in another theater in this town.
They will never come to the Amanda Axel show ever again. If this person does, I will be very surprised, and I'm going to come back on the show and I'm going to tell you guys all about it.
Okay. All
right. So let's talk about being on the flip side of this. Have you guys ever been broken up with in an official way or an unofficial way? It's kind of hard to tell if you've been broken up with unofficially, but you can usually tell.
It takes a little while, but you figure it out.
Yeah, you start seeing the signs.
Yeah, I have. And both. And oh man, it hurts. Especially the official way. In my case, it hurt because what happened, there was a disagreement between us, and basically that person took it in a way that I didn't mean it. I didn't mean the way she feels about it. You know what I mean? And so there was just such a strong pull to want to find a way to like make her see things my way or the way I meant them, or like, no, how is that your reality when when this is mine? You know what I mean? Like, that was really hard. But it still is hard. When I think about it, I'm like, man, but if she had just seen it the way I actually meant it, not the way she decided to take it, what would have happened? Where would we be? And I don't know if this is true in every situation, but I wonder, because in my situation, I think, after a lot of reflecting about this, because this person held a pretty big position in my life as a friend. So there was a lot of reflecting that went on. And I think it really came down to like, it wasn't just that one thing that happened though, obviously, right? I mean, there had to have been some other things, or it had to be bigger than just a disagreement or whatever. I mean, she took it as bigger. You know, I disagreed with her on one thing and she kind of like blew it up into this like, well, you just never believed in me as a person in my whole life. Then I'm like, whoa, what? That is not what we're talking about here. And so it was bigger. It was bigger to her in the moment, but it was also indicative of a bigger issue between us. And I wonder if that's the case many times when something like that happens. I mean, because we just had this whole conversation, the three of us just now, about how when we friendship break up with someone, it's because it's been leading to that. It's because that person has violated boundaries over and over again. So it's not about that one thing. There's usually like a last straw. And I will tell you that with this girl, I can see that that was the last straw, because if I'm being totally honest, I knew that there were some underlying issues between us that were not addressed for a very long time. And they were just kind of cooking there, you know, like I think it was probably a matter of time before something like that happened. There were just things that, you know, I never called out, but looking back, like I knew that they were there between us. So I don't think it's ever just like one thing all of a sudden, even when you think it is, it's not. It can't be, you know, if we know it's not on our end when we're talking about being the one to break up, then we know it can't be on their end for someone else who might do that to us.
Yeah. So for me, like officially, not that I can like recall, you know, like in like a formal, like, dear Chelsea, like, you know, not that I can recall, which makes me feel silly. I hope I'm not like forgetting something important, but I definitely had one of my very closest soulmate kind of friends in the whole world go through a really difficult season of life where she needed to like kind of cleanse her social life a little bit, or she felt like she needed to, and I was part of that. You know, I was, you know, she was starting a new path for herself, and I was not invited to come along on that path really, and that was so painful. It was, I love her, and we're good friends again, and we're in each other's lives, and it's beautiful now. But I'll tell you what, that was, even though that wasn't like a technical breakup, that hurt just as bad as the worst breakup I've ever had. Like I cried as often, probably. I missed her, you guys. And I'm so connected to this woman, to this friend of mine, that like, I sometimes wake up feeling her. Like that's how close we were, you know, as friends, like just connected, like, oh, I need to call her, something's wrong, you know, like that kind of feeling. And so for months after she kind of moved on from everyone, like I would wake up and I'd have that feeling like, oh, I need to go check on her. And then I'd have to tell myself, oh, wait, no, that's not the role I have in her life right now. And that I just need to be okay with that. And it was hard. It was hard. And it made me angry that I loved her so much. You know, I was angry that like I couldn't turn it off, that I couldn't reabsorb all that love. And it's not like she said she didn't want my love or anything. She just basically was like, I need to pretend like none of this love exists, you know? And I think actually, you know, she probably did really amazing, incredible things for herself in that season. So looking back, I'm really grateful for it, you know, for her, for me. And I really like where we're at now as friends. But it was, it's just anytime that we don't get what our heart wants, right? It hurts.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the nature of the heart. What about you, Amanda? Have you ever experienced that?
Not that I can remember, like not in an official capacity. The one friendship that really comes to my mind is, there's two that come to my mind. One, I mean, both of these women I still talk to. The one, this was like in my early 20s, and I don't know what happened, but it doesn't bother me. Like it's like we can still message each other on Facebook or Instagram, and it's not that big of a deal. But the way it started was like a misunderstanding. But it's like Heather said, like, I don't know if there was something more underlying. I have my theories about it, which really have nothing to do with me. Well, I mean, they do, but I don't know. I think she didn't think I was cool enough. I really think that's what it was. I'm just going to say, I think that's what it was.
Man.
I think that's what it was. But I don't know. And unless I ask her, I really won't know. But the other person was someone I was really, really close with. And, they were even in my wedding, and there was never an official breakup or a fight, like ever, but I could tell she was like withdrawing from me, after a certain period in my life, like it was harder to see her, it was harder to connect with her. And it may have just been our circumstances, but I think it was somewhat intentional on her part, because I remember this one day seeing her, and she said a couple of things, and she said them in a very like kind of joking, like just, kind of way, but they were very serious to me. And it really upset me, because I feel like those things that she said were part of the reasons why she decided to discontinue hanging out with me as much. And to me, they all felt like real misunderstandings, and I really felt hurt that I wasn't given the opportunity to, not defend myself, because I didn't do anything wrong, but like to just be able to explain or clarify what was happening to me that she was observing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that really bothered me a lot. Now, again, this person she didn't kick me out of the theater, because she still takes my phone calls, and like I can tell, like we've had a lot of space, and I think like we're coming on this season, we're going to reconnect more. So that's good. And that's actually brings me to the question I wanted to ask you guys about both of these experiences, because they were a lot harsher, in the sense of like there was a real bright line drawn between you and your friend by your friend. So if your friend in each of these situations like came back and wanted to, reconcile, like how would you guys take that, given the time and the space? And I know you guys have very different situations, and this is not a question in general, obviously. This is very unique to these specific situations, but I'm just so curious, because we're talking about this being on the other end, right? So like if we're the ones who are breaking up, and then we say, okay, we open the theater doors and you're allowed back in, how are they going to react? So how would we react in that situation? Heather?
Well, gosh, that feels a little like asking me if I would get back together with my ex.
It's exactly the same. It is.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is a little bit like that.
And then at first you're like, yeah. And then you're like, oh, wait. How are we feeling? Let's remember all the reasons we're here. No, I don't think it wouldn't be automatic. It wouldn't be an automatic yes for me in that situation, because for a long time it would have been. And it's taken me a long time to realize, to see it clearly, like Chelsea was saying about learning from situations, and how this was a hard one for me to learn from, because she cut our communication. Like you said, she was gone, or she, kicked me out of her theater. And so it was hard to learn and get clarity on some things, like, because I couldn't ask her, and so it took a long time. But now I think I've come to a place also where I've done a lot of work on myself, and that's helped clarify a lot too, and helped me see the right thing for me would be, it's not an automatic yes anymore. Because like I said, there were so many things that led up to that falling out that were never addressed. And now one of the prerequisites to a friendship is honesty, and being able to say how I feel without that causing, like an uprising, or like an exit, I mean. And that's actually something I've learned really, really well from you guys, and from every friendship I've had since developing this great friendship with you guys, because, just the more you do it, the easier it gets, the more you get to know yourself, the better, the more you do these actions, the better you get at them. Just like anything else, like learning how to be in good relationship with people is practice. And so I'm much better at it than I used to be, which means I would stop and think and go, okay, wait, what really led us to that moment? What are all the things that we didn't talk about? We would have to be able to talk about those before we can move forward. Obviously there's some stuff to clear out first. So that would be my answer. I mean, there's a lot of people that we just drifted apart. And to this day, I don't know if they stopped talking to me out of some conscious decision to sort of break up with me, or if life just happened. I don't know. And so all I can ask with all of them, if we ever were to reconnect, is honesty, is just, where do I stand with you? And are there things we can't talk about? Because, we need to just like reestablish the boundaries again,
It is an interesting question, letting people back in who have broken up with you. I think it's a really personal question in the sense that it really kind of forces you to ask yourself that question, right? Like, really, would I? And so I think everything Heather's saying, as far as like, it has to be healthy, no matter what. If anybody's coming into your theater or even around your theater, like, it needs to be a healthy situation. So if there's any kind of danger, or if there's any kind of like truly toxic issue at the root of why there was a breakup in the first place, then it probably is not something that should be considered right back in the theater right away, for sure, ever. But I think, like, for me, generally speaking, I would imagine that if somebody were to break up with me, someone who was in my theater already, I really can only imagine that happening under, a handful of situations, and all of them are interpersonal. Almost all of them are completely interpersonal, having to do with our emotions, our feelings, our understanding of one another, our communication process. And so my answer, if someone who broke up with me for interpersonal reasons wanted to come back and be like close to my heart, is yeah. If someone like really was like, came back to me and was sincere, obviously this would need to be a very authentic, sincere, like, hey, whatever they would say, like, hey, I'm sorry that this and this went down this way. I miss you. I want to be back in your life. My immediate answer would most realistically be yes, and then work on things for sure. Because I do think that I have Heather's similar process, but just in a different order. And I think that that's not so much because I think that's the way that people should handle things, but I think it's the only way that I know I'm able to show up completely and try really hard in a friendship is if I have already made the decision that my guard is lowered and they are allowed in my heart. That's just for me personally. Like, I know I won't try really hard and I won't listen completely if I don't let them in first. But again, if there's any kind of dangerous situation or something truly toxic or something that, really affects like your children or something like that, that's a completely different, non-negotiable set of situations, right? But I don't know. What do you think, Amanda?
I mean, yeah. I can only think of this one person who's been out of my theater who was not necessarily my friend, but we had a complicated relationship where we had to be in each other's lives. And she's in my theater again, and she's pretty far up, like, she's not necessarily first row. Maybe she is. I don't know. My first row is kind of full.
This is a big theater, okay? It's like,
you know what? I'd say she's probably like second or third row, because she's back in my life doesn't mean like I've had amnesia. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's the point you guys are both trying to get at, is that, we are friends with some people that we can't trust 100%. And they just hold a different place in our life.
Yeah.
And the ones that are in our front row, those are people that the people who have VIP passes on the stage. Those are the people of all access.
All access.
That we can really trust with our life and our heart and our secrets and, all of those things. So, yeah, I think that there's typically always an opportunity, even though earlier I said there was somebody who I don't think is ever getting back in the theater, but stay tuned.
I feel like if that ever comes up, I need to be the bouncer at the door. This is not.
You would be a good
I second that.
This is not a unanimous decision.
Heather can
yes, if you can convince me, I will grant you an audience.
Seriously.
I don't think
that's what you're talking about. That's why I'm saying this. Just put me at the door and I will handle this for you. Okay. Actually, this is the perfect time to point out this other thought that I had too, is that if you are following along and you are thinking that you have somebody as well that you're like, oh, if they let me back in, would I? And what's your, gut answer? If your gut answer is no because you're angry, like, that's a good temperature to take, though, because there are people who I can never let back in my theater. When I say it's for safety reasons, it started out because of rage reasons. Like, the things that happened made me really angry. Like, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, go back and listen to, God, we'll link to some episode. I can't think right now, but I've talked about it several times. The one I did a solo episode. I did a solo episode a couple weeks ago where I talked a little bit about, I think I mentioned this, about my father and how he's in prison because he committed crimes against children in my family. And I was really angry. Obviously, he's out of my theater, but he stays out of my theater not because I'm still mad at him, but because of safety reasons, right? And so if you have people in your life, that's just a good temperature to take, I think, because if it's out of anger or bitterness, this other girl that I was talking about earlier, who friendship broke up with me officially, and it was really hard and everything. There was a time I probably would have said no because I was still mad about what happened, but that is not a good reason. That's a good temperature about like, well, do you still have stuff to work through? Do you still have forgiveness to give or to yourself or to them or something else to work through about that? That's an important thing, I think, a distinction to make. And the other thing that I want to say about that is just because you have forgiven somebody doesn't mean they get to come back inside automatically. I just really want everybody to hear that, because that was something that kept being said to me right after all this stuff happened with my dad. It kept being said to me, like the first thing that people were saying in our church, everyone that we talked to in our church, the first things out of their mouth when they heard what happened was, well, you have to forgive him because Christ forgives. And it was really hard. I just remember looking people in the eye and going, do you know what time it is? Do you know that this just happened 5 minutes ago? I mean, really, like, let me get there, And I mean, that's a whole other story. And I was so upset that would be the response. But I grew up in a culture, in a church culture that said that he should have been allowed back in my theater because I had forgiven him. And I grew up in a culture that said that if your family wrongs you in any way because they are your family, they automatically get to be back in your theater. And I just want to make sure that it is said point blank right here. Forgiveness does not mean that you let someone back in your life. That's not what forgiveness is, and that's not how it works. Those are separate things, and you should forgive, but that doesn't automatically mean that they get to return to the place that they were in before. So,
right.
I'm sure you guys have, I know for a fact you guys have gone through things with people too, where it's like you had to work through a forgiveness aspect, but that is a totally separate aspect of what row are they in, or are they even here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the theater is a place to be earned. The theater is whoever's in your theater, they are deliberate decisions made by you throughout your life. There's no default theater seats. There's no such thing as a default theater seat. No.
So, as we're wrapping up here, what do you guys want to leave the honeys with? Chelsea?
I think we've gone over such a broad spectrum of like these different parts of who sits in our theater, and who we break up with and who we kick out and stuff like that. That I think the only thing that I would really want to say at the end here is just like just reiterating the importance of who you are in all of these scenarios and in each of these relationships. Don't be afraid to look at yourself. Sometimes it is hard to look at ourselves and try and see ourselves through someone we love, through their eyes in a really honest way. Because the idea of disappointing somebody we love or letting them down in a way that could be painful is equally as painful for us to realize ourselves. And so it goes against our nature a little bit, that like self-protective nature. But I would just encourage everybody out there not to be afraid to self-evaluate when there is somebody that may or may not need to be moved to the back row or to be kicked out of the theater in general, as a whole. So don't be afraid to take a look inside as well. Even if you can still kick them out of the theater. I'm just saying, it's okay to look in the mirror every time you're making any decision that has to do with the people nearest your heart. And that forgiving yourself for kicking people out of the theater, even if for instinctual reasons or for reasons that might not make sense to other people, is equally important. There will be situations probably in some of your lives where you have to kick someone out and you don't really understand completely why. It's an instinct. It's like a gut decision. It's something that you're following because there's something beyond your feelings telling you to do it. And I mean that in a serious way. I'm not talking about petty grievances here. I'm talking about sometimes people come into our lives and we get a sense from them that they don't belong in the front row for sure, but maybe don't even belong in the back row. And if you do ever come across situations like that and you need to remove someone from the theater, even if it's just to give yourself enough space to figure out what it is that's not right with that person, you have permission to do that. And forgive yourself for doing that if other people don't understand or agree, because at the end of the day, the people in your theater, they are the ones who create who you are, and they are the ones who impact how your life plays out. So trust yourself, forgive yourself, believe in yourself, and reflect on yourself. That's what I'd say.
Yes. I love that. I love what you just said, because that makes me think of our episode that we did about the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And how important it is who you have in your theater, in your front row, and your VIP really does influence how your life's going to go. And I would say that, anytime we have challenges in our relationships, and, specifically today, we're talking about in our friendships, those challenges are always for us. And so none of us are sitting here obviously trying to tell you when it's time to break up with someone or how to do it, because really only you can know that, because every situation is so different. And the way you feel about it, the way your friends feel about it is just completely unique to your situation. I think there's always something to be learned. And I think whenever we're going through something like this, we should reflect on, what have I learned about myself as a person? What have I learned about myself as a friend? And what have I learned about this person that I love? And I think too, the other thing, and we didn't really talk about this much, but we talk about it all the time. So kind of in this episode, it goes without saying, is that exactly as Heather said, would we get to this point where there's a last straw, it's usually because there's a series of issues that haven't been addressed. And so I really hope that all of us are taking the time to address those things with our friends, so that they don't build up and become a big thing where you do have to make that kind of decision, because nobody wants to kick people out of their theater. I don't think, anyway. I certainly don't. I don't think Chelsea and Heather want to. It sucks. Okay. It sucks. So if we can take steps to try to mitigate situations like that, then we definitely should take advantage of those. So what about you, Heather?
I just want to say one more quick thing about what we said kind of near the beginning, where the whole reason that we wanted to do this episode is because we were coming from a culture that used to be a little bit permanent mindset in terms of like our relationships and our friendships. And once you're in, and that's that. And now we're coming into a sort of trendy time for people to be saying, oh, you don't like what I do? Well, then you don't have to be in my life. Bye. Or like, we drop people easily. We think we have a right to do that. We have this I don't owe you anything mentality. And we really, really wanted to address that in this episode today. And I think we did a great job of that by just saying that there is a third option. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I'm saying that for myself as well, because I still tend to think in an all or nothing mindset sometimes too. I'm a quick decision maker, and then I have little patience for anything but a quick follow through. So I am very much an all or nothing. So I understand that mentality. I understand that I don't owe you anything mentality, because I understand where it comes from, which is I don't owe letting you be toxic to me. That's what it should say, but that won't fit on an Instagram meme. So they shortened it. And I get it. I totally get it. I respect it. I like them, literally like them when I see them in my feed, because I know that's what they mean. But that's not really it, because actually the truth is it's not about I don't owe you anything. It's about I deserve this. I deserve for you to not treat me with dysfunction. I deserve for you to treat me with respect. I deserve for you to be honest with me and kind and caring and compassionate in the way you deal with me as a friend. And when somebody doesn't fit that, then we just want to move on. But the thing is, if you deserve it, they do too. And so I just, especially in an episode like this where we're just trying to be fun and catchy and, friendship decluttering, sparking joy, Marie Kondo, haha. But seriously, if you deserve all of those things, then so do other people. And we just want to encourage you to be kind, and not just to yourself, which we talk about a lot and we're always going to talk about, but to other people, because the way you treat people when they're on their way out of your life is really telling for how you're going to treat the next person when they're on their way in. And so if you don't want to keep replacing your theater with the same kind of people, it really, really starts with your mindset and your attitude and how you approach even something like a friendship breakup. And so at some point, I don't know how isn't an excuse anymore, because we just told you. And so now it's up to you to decide that not only you deserve those things, but they deserve those things too. And we are counting on our honeys to go out there and treat people the way that you would want to be treated, just like we've talked about here today. And so we can't wait to see you do that. Not that we can't wait to see you break up with people. That is not what we're saying. We just want you to make a new Instagram meme. Can somebody do that and tag us? That would be lovely. Thank you for listening today.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Raw Honeys podcast. If so, please share it with a friend or post a review. Heather, Chelsea, and I would love to connect with you. Check us out on Instagram at The Raw Honeys, or join our community of honeys on Facebook. Thanks for listening. We wish you nothing but big love.